Welcome back to Rabbit Hole History, where each week for 6 weeks I dive into a historical topic that I'm interested in. If you joined me last week, we talked about entertainment, such as drama, the Olympics, and fashion in ancient Greece. This is week 5 of my 6-week journey into ancient Greek history. Feel free to go check out those videos before jumping into this one. But this week's video I've been so excited to get into. I made a recipe from an ancient Greek-style cookbook. I'm super excited to share it with you, talk a little bit about the history of food in ancient Greece, and how I made this recipe. So let's just get right back into it. Welcome back to Rabbit Hole History. Greek food is one of my favorite cuisines. I could probably eat feta cheese and grape leaves all day, every day. But I know those recipes must have taken so many years to develop and perfect. So what did an ancient Greek kitchen look like? And judging from pictures and reconstructions of kitchens, it's about what you'd expect. Wood burning with clay pots, simple. And the recipes are pretty simple too. But that doesn't make them any less interesting or delicious, as we're about to find out. Now, when I was prepping for this video and figuring out where was I going to find an ancient Greek recipe, I came across the most amazing source. Today's recipe comes out of the Classical Cookbook by Andrew Dalby and Sally Ranger. These two authors went ahead and did the research on all of these ancient recipes and modernized them for today's measurements and ingredients. It's amazing. I can't believe this is out there. This is exactly what I was looking for and made my research so much easier. So anyway, that's where I'm getting today's recipe. This book is amazing. These authors are so cool. Definitely read through it if you're interested, like I was in ancient cooking. Now, one thing about me is that I love cheese. I can't get enough of it. So naturally, the one recipe that I picked out upon my first flip through of the book was a cheese recipe. So this recipe is called garlic cheese. Another really cool thing about this book is that it's all derived from stories that have been translated by the authors. So here's an excerpt that they've translated that gives us this moritum, or garlic cheese recipe. First, lightly digging into the ground with his fingers, he pulls up 4 heads of garlic with their thick leaves. Then he picks slim celery tops and sturdy rue from the thin stems of trembling coriander. He splashes a grass-grown bulb with water and puts it into the hollow mortar. He seasons with grains of salt, and after the salt, hard cheese is added. Then he mixes in the herbs. With the pestle, his right hand works at the fiery garlic, then he crushes all alike in a mixture. His hand circles. Gradually, the ingredients lose their individuality. Out of the many colors emerges one, neither wholly green, for the white tempers it, nor shining white, since tinted by so many herbs. The work goes on, not jerkily as before, but more heavily the pestle makes its slow circuits. So he sprinkles in some drops of Athena's olive oil and adds a little sharp vinegar, and again works his mixture together. Then at length he runs 2 fingers round the mortar, gathering the whole mixture into a ball, so as to produce the form and name to a finished moritum. Meanwhile, busy Cybele has baked a loaf. This he takes after wiping his hands. So from this story, we have a recipe for moritum. So without further ado, here's my attempt at that recipe. Our ingredients list includes 2 heads, remember I said heads, of garlic, 8 ounces of Parmesan or Pecorino Romano cheese, 1 large handful of coriander leaves. I'm using cilantro because I couldn't find leaves of coriander, 2 teaspoons of chopped fresh rue, which I'll explain later, 2 heaped teaspoons of chopped fresh celery leaf. I'm just using celery salt, 1 tablespoon of white wine vinegar, and 1 tablespoon of olive oil. So we'll start with a little mise, and I'm gonna grate all of this Parmesan. You can also chop up the coriander or cilantro a little bit with a knife or even with your hands. And from there, I'm gonna take the easy modern way out and pretty much add everything into a food processor. So I'm gonna toss the garlic in. Notice how I'm only throwing 2 cloves in. I'm gonna realize this is a mistake later. And I'm gonna add all of my grated Parmesan. Next, I'm gonna add the rue. I had to order this off of Amazon. I've never really heard of it before, but it smells like green tea and it's advertised a lot of the same way that green tea is. So maybe I could have just used 2 teaspoons of green tea, but I wanted to follow the recipe as best I could, so in goes 2 teaspoons of the roux. Then I'm adding a whole bunch of cilantro. You can also use coriander, but like I said, I wasn't able to find coriander leaves, only dried coriander. Then next comes the celery seed, but I'm using celery salt. I wasn't able to find celery seed. And so then all of our dry ingredients are added. We're gonna start blending everything up. I blended everything for probably about a minute until it almost looked kind of sandy, but still a little smooth. And then I'm gonna add 1 tablespoon of the white wine vinegar. And it wouldn't be a Greek Mediterranean recipe without a tablespoon of olive oil. So with these wet ingredients added, I'm gonna blend it a little more so that it gets even a little more smooth and kind of pasty. And that's pretty much it. Or so I thought. It still did look a little bit sandy, but I figured maybe if I just had to get it out of the food processor. I had my pretty scene with fresh baked bread all ready to go, but I noticed it still kind of looked a little sandy. But I persisted and we tried some on a little bit of bread, and there was just kind of something off about it. I knew it was gonna kind of be an out-of-the-box recipe, but I was kind of expecting it to be a little more paste-like, or this just kind of tasted like an unincorporated pesto. And so I returned to the recipe and realized I made a grave mistake. It was the garlic. I don't know how I missed this because the authors literally warn that this recipe is not for the faint-hearted and calls for 20 cloves of garlic instead of the 2 that I originally added. So I threw everything back into the food processor with about 18 more cloves of garlic and food processed it for probably another 20 to 30 seconds. And that was where I realized the error of my ways. The mixture definitely began to come together with the addition of more garlic. It literally turned into a little paste that I was looking for. So I reset my pretty little scene and we tried it again. This time it tasted a lot more full. This is much more what I was looking for and expecting in the dish. It was incredibly salty and garlicky, but it tasted really good on a piece of crusty bread, just like the author suggested. I don't know if I would make this normally, but it would definitely be a fun little historical recipe to serve in the same way that you would crusty bread with dipping olive oil. Maybe it's a good idea to heat it up a little bit so the cheese really gets a little melty. If you do decide to follow along, let me know what you did and what you thought of it. And that's where we're going to pause the rabbit hole dive for today. This was so much fun. This was my favorite video that I've made so far. I love cooking. It was super fun to take a look at an ancient recipe and kind of what somebody would have maybe eaten during this time period. Food is just always extra fascinating to me. I think it's one of the ways I can connect to different cultures and time periods the most. It's such a powerful part of our culture and any culture, so I just think it's extra fun to be able to cook an ancient recipe. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope maybe you're inclined to follow along and recreate this recipe. Definitely go check out that cookbook. I'll link to an Amazon description of the book. And next week we're gonna kind of wrap up my ancient Greek series. I'll talk about kind of a day in the life of an ancient Greek citizen, as well as some examples of how the culture has still persisted in today's modern society. And I'll also announce what series 2 on this channel is going to be. So I'm looking forward to that. I hope you are too. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, interact, all that stuff, you know. Thank you so much again for watching, and we'll see you next week.